can I say that this session deals with disparate topics: Qantas, war artists, and sailors. And the first paper will be delivered by Mitchelhill-Green, who's the author of about 5 books on various aspects of military history, and he's also a winner of the excellent RAF Heritage Awards. So he spreads himself over various areas of expertise, and he'll be talking about the extraordinary story of the Qantas double sunrise flights. David, over to you. Don't worry.
Okay, thank you, Peter. What I'd like to do in the next 15 minutes is just to talk about some excerpts from the chapter and also bring some life to certain remarkable individuals contained within. And I'd like to start off with this map, which I find quite extraordinary. This is the limit of the Japanese advance by June 1942. And you can see Indian Ocean raid, which I think Megan spoke about in April 42. And traditionally, the air link from Australia to the motherland was through Singapore. So as a consequence of that being severed, there was the idea to fly from Australia directly to Ceylon. And the aircraft chosen for this was the Catalina. And we'll talk about that why soon. Anyway, just as a backstory, Hudson Fysh was the champion of this particular route, and he enlisted in the Light Horse. He served in Palestine, Gallipoli, and then joined the Flying Corps. He was an observer and I think gained the DFC. But post-war, with Fergus McMaster, founded Qantas. And ever the businessman, he proposed an air link to Ceylon during the war that would obviously help connect Australia, the Middle East and India, provide a channel for diplomatic mail, maintain contact between MacArthur and Wavell's respective headquarters, transport military and government personnel, and obviously help patrol the strategically important Indian Ocean. And always with a commercial interest in mind, will greatly guarantee our continuance of the connection. And this led after the war, obviously, to the Kangaroo Hop. And for every flight across the Indian Ocean, I think they were paid £100. So he always had a foot in the commercial camp. So I'd like to look at a few of the individuals now. First of all, Lester J. Brain, who was commissioned into the reserve before joining Qantas in 1924. And he was awarded the Air Force Cross in 1929 for helping to locate the Kookaburra, which was a light aircraft which had gone missing in the outback in search of Kingsford Smith's Southern Cross. And then later he helped rescue 2 pilots who also crash landed in Arnhem Land. He had attained 1 million air miles by 1936, and in 1941 he helped organise the ferry flights of RAAF Catalinas from San Diego across to Sydney. And in doing so, he established a new trans-Pacific record. Quite extraordinary. And then to cap it off, during the air raid in Broome on the 3rd of March 1942, he was responsible for rescuing 10 people from the water. We see this picture here. This is actually in Pearl Harbor. The US State Department decreed that Australian civilians were to fly the aircraft to be delivered. And so they were, actually it's listed there on the far left, and they collected the Catalinas from Pearl Harbor to then fly them forward, which obviously gave Qantas some background and experience in flying the Catalina. William Bill Crowther. William was commissioned into the Air Force Reserve and then joined Qantas in 1924. And he's one of the first pilots to fly on the Empire Air Route to England via Singapore. He piloted the last civilian aircraft out of Singapore on the 3rd of February 1942, carrying 40 evacuees. During the Japanese air raid on Darwin on the 19th of February 1942, incredibly rowed out and boarded and helped rescue the QEA, the Qantas Empire Airlines, as they were also known, flying boat Camilla. And this plane had already been shot up, was full of holes, and yet he managed to board it and take off in the middle of the raid. And he also helped develop the wartime link between Perth and Ceylon. The next individual I'd like to talk about was Russell B. Tapp. Russell had earned his wings in the Royal Flying Corps in 1917. And on the photo on the right-hand side, you can see Russell flanked by Charlie Chaplin's wife, and Charlie Chaplin's mother. Anyway, I digress. Piloting the flying boat Corinthian. This particular flying boat hit debris as it was landing on Darwin Harbour on the 22nd of March 1942. He was rescued and pulled up a rescue launch, and then dived overboard onto the sinking hull of this particular flying boat to try and rescue any survivors. Later, in 1944, on the 14th, he'd actually made a stopover en route to Ceylon to pick up a seaman with an appendicitis. And on this particular occasion, a Japanese bomber flew overhead and then returned later to actually drop bombs, none of which caused any damage, but another brush with death. Anyway, let's look now at this particular amazing journey from Perth to Ceylon. And originally the flying boats were taking off from Exmouth, but the seas proved too rough, and so they changed to the calmer waters of the Swan River. And this is the V star pictured in the foreground. All the Catalinas were named after constellations because they relied upon astronavigation to cross the Indian Ocean. And at the other end, they landed on the lovely Lake Cogla. Anyway, I was fortunate enough to be there several months ago, and I hired a little boat, and talking about monsoons and so forth, the ferryman said, "Don't worry." And I said, "It's going to rain." "No, it won't." Anyway, sure enough, it did. The weather started getting rough, and the Chinese ship was tossed. And what you can't see there is the lightning strikes. And I just could not help but think of planes flying on fumes after 24 hours plus, and then landing on this lake. And also in this lake, there's a multitude of little islands, even rocks. And so pilot fatigue, running on fumes, and then to land safely on this lake was really reinforced. And then when I was getting out of my boat, sodden, this water snake, you jogged my memory, just slithered past me. So. Anyway, after that, I decided to dry out in the nearby Catalina Grill. And if there's any eagle-eyed plane spotters here, Bill?
Yes.
You'll notice it's not a Catalina, it's a 4-engined Sunderland.
Radial engine.
Radial, yeah, and also 4 engines, so yeah, an unfortunate mistake. Anyway, let's look at the first flights now. Across. So Russell Tapp piloted the first flight from Perth to Ceylon on the 29th of June 1943, returning on the 7th of July. And flights outward from Ceylon climbed around 10,000 feet to benefit from the tailwind, which would help shoot them home, whereas those flights coming from Perth to Ceylon flew between, say, 1,500 and 2,500 feet to minimise headwinds. But this came with the problem that often they were under the cloud layer and it interfered with celestial navigation. And I can't help but think 1 degree of error and you're travelling 3,500 miles, you'd end up in the middle of the ocean. And then there was a revised, an addition, if you like, to the service which began on 4th of February 1943, with these flying boats continuing on from Lake Cogla onto Karangi Creek in what was then British India. And Rex Senior, who was one of the pilots and also navigators, rode the great loneliness he experienced in the midst of the ocean as night folded over the sea and slowly the stars appeared. For the next 9 hours until the sun should appear, they will be our guides and our friends. And of course they had to maintain radio silence this whole time. And then for those passengers who travelled on this particular flight, they were awarded the secret order of the double sunrise. And this one was awarded to a Brigadier N.W. Weir, flight time of 29 hours 10 minutes in August of 44. And this is Rex Senior, and obviously proud of what he'd done. He's recorded as saying decades later, "We were aware that we were doing something that had never been done before. It was very exciting. And when we reached our destination, we realized that we managed to do what aviation authorities believed was impossible." And if you look at this today, this still remains the longest commercial flight in history. With the flights taken between 27 and 33 hours. Just remarkable. And these aircraft, let's remember, were stripped of all insulation and extra fuel tanks added. And so it was Spartan. There was a couple of cold cuts served mid-flight, and then you're pretty much cramped for the duration of this. I think there were 3 seats for passengers for the duration of the flight. In all, Qantas delivered 262 flights across the Indian Ocean, hauling 110,000 pounds of mail, 13,000 pounds of freight, and carrying without loss 630 passengers. And given that the Qantas aviators were part of the Air Force Reserve and the Australian government didn't recognise entitlements for civilian pilots, the only award they received was a tiny gold cross that they could wear above their wings. Sometimes it's called the Crow Cross. This was promulgated by Fish, but that was the sole recognition they received. The next aircraft to supplant, well actually they flew in tandem for a while, were converted Liberators. And this particular individual, Joe Wilson, was the first Australian pilot. He was a Queensland pilot, and he ferried the first Liberator home from the UK. And interestingly, and I think this may have been one of the first brushes of an Australian with Japanese aggression, in 1939 he was flying at de Havilland en route from Hong Kong to Bangkok, and he was shot down. I think it's known as the Waiche incident, and he was held for a week or so after he forced landed, and he was taken by a Japanese bomber to Canton, today Gwangju, and awaiting warship. So just a little, it was a little anecdote, a little side that I wasn't aware of, but once again, an amazing individual and this amazing Tapp. And then Wilson later ferried bombers from Hudson bombers from Canada across to Britain, and also flew the Imperial's link from Britain to neutral Sweden carrying mail. Towards the end of the war, 1944, there was another aircraft type, a civilianised version of the Lancaster bomber, and Russell P. Tapp flew the first one of these across, and as he said, the old Catalina had proven itself as a long-range distance plane and put up a marvellous performance. Sadly, given that they were Lend-Lease equipment, after they were made surplus, these particular Catalinas were towed out to near Rottnest Island, where a TNT charge sent them to the bottom of a watery grave. So. And as Hudson Fish later wrote, the service was quite unique in the history of air transport. There's never been a service like it, and there probably never will. Really quite remarkable. And I thank Andrew and Darryl for the opportunity to research this chapter with what's quite an extraordinary book. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David.